Oi, oi, it's your boy Jack Slack coming at you off a throat thing where I lost my voice, so be patient with me today. But we're back in the film room, and today we're talking about a fighter very close to my heart, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. He's a guy I just really enjoy watching fight. He seems to get better every time, and he just brings it. He's a really fun fighter to watch. And I think our focus today is going to be less on his striking, which I do enjoy. He's got a really nice sort of boxing game that's got a lot of head movement that isn't always like avoiding punches, but keeps him safe than most fighters are. He throws punches and then he moves his head and then he keeps throwing punches and it gets him in and he applies a lot of pressure. But what we're going to be focusing on today is strangling people because he's very, very good at it. And he manages to do it in a way where he doesn't give up position a whole lot. There's a very famous meme, "Don't be silly, jump the gilly," about Dustin Poirier jumping guillotines. Right, we're going to talk about three different types of guillotines, or two different types of guillotines and not a guillotine at all, but we'll get into that. Right, this is a fight in GKO. Michael Persons, or Mike Persons, ducks in. Watch Hernandez's, not this hand, this arm. This arm is currently at this sort of angle. He's going to get it deep, and his wrist is going to be up here. Boom. See that? There's his glove. His left glove. He's got it all the way through under here. Now, this is a high-wrist guillotine or a power guillotine, depending on what you do with the grips. But this is really important because it changes the choke. Classical guillotine is your forearm across their windpipe, which sucks, but is also really easy for them to get their fingers inside and start clawing down. This, getting the high wrist, is more like a front naked choke or a rear naked choke, but from the front. And what he's going to do is get his hands together and he's going to push up. Or you'll see people lock the figure four here, but this is a really strong guillotine. Cody McKenzie did it with this. They sometimes call it the Buddha fist guillotine. Hold on. Yeah, because you get the palm of your hand and the fist with this hand that's doing the choking, or the arm that's doing the choking, and you just put it up there. And yeah, really strong choke, very hard to fight off because the hands are above your shoulders, basically behind you, so you can't really fight them. Whereas if you've got the forearm across the windpipe, there's a lot you can do to just claw at that. Chases him across the cage. Persons ducks in. Wrist high. There, look, beautiful. Right, so this is the fight with Josh Fremd. I'm being very careful how much UFC footage I use here. But this is the same sort of principle. Fremd ducks in along the fence. This arm is already, he's in the V of the bicep. I've drawn him a really long arm here, sorry. It's probably more like that. But Fremd's windpipe is in the V of this, in the crook of the elbow, basically, or close to it. This wrist is nice and high. This is a really interesting position that you see loads in cage wrestling now, because if you get the guy shooting in and you just drop your hand down here, your arm down here, and then you lazily bring it up like that, and you see guys trying to do it so nonchalantly. Look at that. He's just oozing chill, this attitude. Because if you do it, if you draw attention to it, this guy will realize that he's jumping into a ninja choke. But what a lot of guys then do is you punch the figure four across the top, or you just start pushing up on this arm. You need to enclose the back of his head somehow. You need to get over the top of it with your chest, with your other arm in a figure four. But you can snap on a real tight choke here. Look, he's right in the V of the bicep there, or the V of the elbow. Really tight choke. Has to spin and hits the fence so Fluffy can't follow him, but Fluffy comes up on the back, and that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today. And this is something that Leo Nogueira used to do. Leo Nogueira, brother of Paquinho Nogueira, the first great featherweight in MMA, but a great submission grappler with a luta livre background. And he does these amazing rolling guillotines with the V of the elbow right on the opponent's windpipe. And he tends to finish them. This is from Gamble Dub's highlight, which is great, by the way. He tends to finish them rather than like his hips being under him in sort of a guardy position. He finishes them where he's this way and the opponent's that way, rather than the opponent on top of him like that. And this is a thing we're going to talk about a lot today. The difference between Anthony Hernandez's quote-unquote guillotine, we're going to call it a seated arm triangle or whatever today. The difference between that and what a lot of guys do is not giving up top position. So this is more an orthodox sort of guillotine. Well, actually, we're going to see two types of guillotine here against Preston Snook. This is an earlier fight from GKO. Snook goes in on the takedown. If you want a good guillotine, or the old consensus on the good guillotine, if you don't want an arm-in guillotine, you get the neck, and you've got to dig this hand inside, in front of this shoulder, ideally. This shoulder. So you can link your hands, and you exclude this arm, his arm. You don't want that in there. That's a different type of choke. So he's digging for it. And then this is the Marcelo Garcia invention, the high elbow guillotine. If you go watch Marcelo Garcia's highlights or the video I made on him a while ago, left hand across the throat or left forearm across the throat, hands linked, right elbow goes up and over the opponent's shoulder. And if you've got your right elbow up and over their shoulder, one of the defenses to the guillotine is for them to reach this arm up and over your arm. And you can't do that with this elbow in the way. The other thing is if they hit the mat, this guy can run all the way around Fluffy Hernandez's guard, and the arm positioning will keep them locked together. It's very hard to... Once you're in the high elbow guillotine, you're not going to beat it by running around their guard like you will a lot of other sort of basic guillotines. Loses it there, goes at low elbow now. See, this is the defense that I was talking about. The high elbow prevents the guy normally from doing this, hugging you over the top of this arm. And now we're much more into a, like, he can pull on your arms and pull your wrist away from his throat situation. Speed it up a bit here. Oh yeah, this is another thing that Hernandez does that I'm always talking about nowadays, but it's so important. If you can hit whizzer throws off the fence, life is so much better for you in MMA right now. This is something you'll see from guys who like guillotines. They'll give up the underhook. So you see Snook on the bottom here has this underhook. They'll normally post this hand just under the armpit. You normally sort of get your thumb in there. And what this does is that he gets the underhook, but there's a bit of distance between the two of you. So you can sit back and then you can start trying to wrap his head as he comes up. Gordon Ryan does this a lot. There you go. See, as he comes up, wraps his head. Rafa Mendes used to do this loads back in the day. Pummels his hand in front, wants the arm out guillotine, the guillotine with just the throat in there. Goes arm out. He's got arm in now, so that's a bit different. But high elbows sometimes helps on an arm in. There's about 10 different grips for an arm in. This is cool. Look, he tries to get that wrist high. Doesn't quite do it, but this is something he does a lot. Attacking the guillotine, and then as the guy postures up, you just trip him. He's done that a few times in his career. Fedor used to do that. He also used to just let the guy's head pop out and start swinging. Bit of half guard. A few elbows. Guy comes up. Wraps the neck. Just a regular guillotine. When I say regular guillotine, I mean no arm in. Snook's arm is not through this hole. And we're going forearm across the neck. Forearm across the windpipe. It's the oldest sort of guillotine. It's probably the least, or it's the most counterable sort of guillotine. And when I say counter, I don't mean like they're going to punish you for it. But I mean it's the one that people can defend. But if you get it under the neck, under the chin, and you catch the guy in transition dead to rights, it's still a very legitimate technique. He's always seemed like a bit of a sore winner, actually, Hernandez. But now we're getting into what Hernandez really does that makes him special. This is a type of guillotine that is called a guillotine, but sometimes goes down as an arm triangle, sometimes goes down as a guillotine, sometimes gets mistakenly recorded as an anaconda choke or something like that. But I say mistakenly. We're getting into the minutiae of names and who really cares that much. Arm in guillotine here, not really getting it, but pulls the guy's head down and then trips him, as we were just talking about. But this is the move. Now, that looks like a guillotine. And, you can call it a guillotine. That's absolutely fine. But the reason that, like, Danaher and his crew call it a seated arm triangle or a seated katakatami, I think Keenan Cornelius calls it a hip hugger. But notice that the neck's in the hole, as you have with all guillotines. But this arm, Hunter's left arm, is in the choke. It's in the noose. Which is, if you flip this round so that Hernandez is on top, it looks a lot like an arm triangle. You're strangling around both the neck and the shoulder. So guys have a lot of success working on the mechanics of trying to get the inside of this elbow snug to the neck and squeezing the opponent's shoulder into their neck from the other side, as opposed to pulling up on the front of the windpipe in a classical guillotine. And it's super effective. And it's been a part of his game since, I think this is his second fight in GKO. This is against Kenny Ento. Gets on the back, runs around, comes back through. And that knee sliding through is a hugely important part, because this knee is what keeps everything tight on this side of the body and keeps Ento or whoever's arm in. So you'll see him doing it from one hook in later on, but the real tricky thing is that it's basically you're going behind the opponent, then you're coming back round in front of them. So it looks like you're sacrificing position, because you go from behind them in the turtle, which is a pretty good position, and often Hernandez will have this hook in. He doesn't now, but a lot of the time he will. And you give that up to go over the head and run back round in front of them and sit down. Now, if you've seen a load of people lose fights and lose position because they've jumped to gilly, this will set alarm bells going. But for reasons we'll get into in a second, it's not actually that bad. This is the famous one, the one that won him all the fans, Rodolfo Vieira. This dude here, one of the greatest grapplers of all time. Absolute monster. Fluffy Hernandez tires him out, basically working safely off his back and forcing his way up and then putting the pace on Vieira. Vieira keeps shooting these bad shots, and what you're going to see is when a fighter shoots like this and then brings that leg up, he's going to sit through. He's going to sit through this way. He's going to extend this leg, this bottom leg, towards him, and he's going to try and put it through his legs and pull him into half guard. But he didn't, because the sprawl's too heavy. Now, this arm is what's stopping Hernandez from going around behind him, which is almost always the goal when you've got a turtled opponent. So Hernandez links his hands, uses his elbow to pull. Look how he's pulled Vieira's elbow forward already with his grip. Now, he's going to use this forearm and the gable grip there. Ooh, that's too thick, she said. He's going to use this gable grip here to prevent this elbow and this arm from coming out the side here to stop him from running round. What he's going to do is place this knee behind this elbow as like a check. There we go. And this is a great position because you can start entering crucifixes on this arm. You can backstep this leg round and just run round to the back. Or you can go straight into the transition that he does here. He's got that space open between elbow and knee. Rodolfo Vieira's elbow and knee. He's got that space open because he's checking it with this knee. He's going to insert this knee in its place. Boom, there. Beautiful. Knee slides in deep, pushing Vieira's left elbow across his body, or across to the other side of Hernandez, or keeping it on Hernandez's body. Sits down. Beautiful. Really strong choke. Vieira's already knackered and has to tap. He gets it from all sorts of places, or rather he keeps making the opportunity to get it by putting people down on their fronts, by knocking people down along the cage, and then they build up into the all fours, or the turtle, or quad pod, or whatever variation of that they're doing. But one of the things that really fascinates me about this choke, and why I think it fits so well into like the wrestling riding or style of grappling, is that it's quite low risk if you do it well. So here he's behind Josh Fremd, switches over, sits through. Oh, I jumped the gun. Switches over, sits through, loses the elbow there. That's quite an important point. So you'll notice that Fremd tucked his elbow back to about there. That's going to be Fremd's sort of answer to this choke, because everyone knows it's coming. He's been doing it since his first fight. You can watch we're going to watch his brilliant fight with Brendan Allen in LFA, and Brendan Allen knows it's coming over and over again. But what Fremd is doing is he's basing on this hand here, putting his weight back, and he's trying to pull this elbow back across his body. That's a lot of lines, sorry. I'll do a different colour one for the elbow. He's trying to pull his elbow back across his body. What that means is that Hernandez is able to just come up with him because he's sitting back. He's sitting away from him. He's not trying to put his weight into Hernandez and pin him to the mat, as often happens when you jump like an arm in ghillie. So Hernandez is basically being pulled up by Fremd here. Comes up on the front headlock, and then he can start running around to the back again, or attacking like a regular guillotine. The more common counter you'll see, this is beautiful, he escapes an armbar by Shabazian and goes straight into it, but the more common counter you'll see is guys trying to sit through, which Rodolfo sort of tried to do, but he was already tired. So what they'll do is, as you sit through on this, they'll try and turn their hips and run, your knee is floating here, and they're going to try and clear that and run this way. The problem is that they're exposing their back here, so what you'll see is guys trying to put this hook in. Hernandez does a couple of things. Sometimes he puts that hook in. You need to sort of like grab an underhook on this arm to do that and pull yourself onto the back. But Hernandez also, if this foot comes close, he's always looking to grab the ankle, which really hinders the guy getting up. But basically, Shabazian's going to escape this, and Hernandez is just going to chase him up into the back body lock, grabs the ankle there, and ride him back down immediately. Oh, we've jumped ahead. So this all ties in with how Fluffy Hernandez controls his opponent when they're turtled. He likes to put in one hook and then not commit to actually getting fully on the opponent's back a lot of the time. So you'll see Brendan Allen's just trying to clear that one hook at the moment. He plays a lot on the ankle like that, which is really helpful for stopping the opponent from getting away, because anytime they start to stand up, you just pull that out. But it's also really good because if you lift it into their butt, they go forwards onto their hands, and that opens the space between elbow and knee that he likes to slide his knee through for that seated arm triangle, or to insert the one hook for a crossbody ride or back control. But Hernandez's hands are floating all the time. It's this one hook that's in that's the real interesting part, because that's attached him to his opponent. He's threatening to get on the back now, but then he goes back. He sits back around to the side there and starts punching some more. And what you'll see, this is something that Ben Askren used to do. I think BJJ Scout did a great study on it back in the day. But having that one hook in underneath, his foot's actually there, but that one hook in underneath Allen here sort of slows down what he can do and limits his options. You'll see him grabbing this wrist. You'll see Hernandez using this hand to grab this wrist a lot and land punches on this side with his right hand. You'll see him grab that ankle to stop Allen standing up. And at any point, he can turn back to face the legs and sit down on the seated arm triangle again. Landing some punches. Allen throws a cheeky back elbow there. Threatens to take full back control here, which he does a couple of times in this fight. But this is the really interesting thing. If you have the one hook in and the opponent falls on their side, you end up in what's called three-quarter mount. You see there? Where he's as good as in mount, wouldn't get the points in jiu-jitsu because his foot is still stuck, quote-unquote, stuck between Brendan Allen's legs. But as a punching position, it's exactly the same as mount. And he's also got that Dagestani handcuff on the other hand there because he'd come from trying to get on the back. Yep, this is a familiar position if you've seen any of the, well, I was going to say any of the Dagestanis, or basically anyone in recent MMA history. They love this position. Because Allen tries to get up on that elbow, and he just keeps folding him down. To emphasize my point about this single hook, here he is on the back of Fremd. He's got the one hook between Fremd's legs. He can pass this hand over the head and start doing the choke, the seated arm triangle or whatever. He's holding this ankle here to prevent Fremd from getting up. He can start punching him. He can start attacking his wrist. But the interesting thing is that the leg configuration, however this guy turns, things get generally worse for him. Here Hernandez is holding this ankle and he actually gives him a bit of a push this way. There you go. And he folds him down. And now look, he's in that three-quarter mount again. His knees peeking through on this side. He's mounted on top of Fremd. But he can also look for the rear naked choke. If you saw Diego Ferreira submit Anthony Pettis, he submitted him basically, look, this is three-quarter mount here. He's mounted, but his foot is trapped between Fremd's legs. But he's also got the rear naked choke here. You can finish that there. Diego Ferreira did against Anthony Pettis. Another great thing about three-quarter mount is that while you are functionally in the mount, this guy is turned on his side, often he's pinching his legs together around your foot. But if he's not, you can just use this leg to weigh on his bottom leg, and you've turned him on his side, so bridging is less of an option. So often they end up sitting up and trying to give their back. And Hernandez will threaten the choke, but he's never really committing to full back control. Back on the ankle again here. It's very rare that he puts in the second hook with his right leg here. He tends to just ride on people and beat them up, which is part of why he's such a smothering, overwhelming sort of guy. Tires out almost everyone he fights. Yeah, that just looks like it sucks to have to deal with. So here he's tried to hop onto Fremd's back from that single hook control. He ends up falling off. But you'll notice his arm goes over the head and he's back into almost that seated arm triangle again. His knee's not quite as deep because he's got the hook in, but he can start to threaten it. And more importantly, he can underhook on this side and start turning Fremd over this way. Fremd's gum shield falls out. And look, because of the leg position, we're up in the 3/4 mount again. Foot's in there. Fremd's on his side. Can't bridge this way. Basically has to try and give up his back again to get out of this. He's just stuck in this awful middle position the entire time. And I said he can attack the seated arm triangle from having one hook in, but it's generally better to get the hook out and drive your knee all the way across. Here's a great example. He's got one hook in. This leg is hooked in here. He starts grabbing at Fremd's ankle, as he has been the whole fight. And we saw him earlier push into Fremd and knock him over. But what he's doing here is he just pushes into him. Fremd adjusts, and as Fremd adjusts his balance, this hook comes out. Then the knee comes back in and he attacks the seated arm triangle. So it gives him a push. Knee comes out. Knee back in. Seated arm triangle. Ends up in an anaconda. So he catches the ankle, gives him a little push. And as Fremd moves, you saw Fremd's leg goes back, the hook comes out. Now you'll see no hook in, hook is over here, but the knee's in, and that means that he can start sliding in for the seated arm triangle. There's actually some nice follow-ups if you botch it. If you notice here, gets behind that elbow, sits down, loses the elbow. You saw Fremd's left elbow come back in there. Still tries to punch his hands through on an anaconda. And eventually comes up, changes the grip, and starts going for a Darce. And he's mounted the legs. Again, anytime you can pinch the guy's legs together and have him on his side, that's awesome. But his fight with Brendan Allen in LFA is brilliant. They both look pretty good in it, but Fluffy dominates. But Brendan knows this is coming over and over again, so he's always 2 hands on that one wrist, because if Hernandez can't get the hand all the way across the body, he's not getting the choke. And anytime he gets into real trouble, his hips go through. He sits through. Like that. Danger is that, well, I mean, the great thing is that Hernandez can keep coming up behind him. Oh, look, we're back in 3/4 mount again. But literally every time Hernandez starts to sit down, Allen just sits through. Sometimes even doing it preventatively. Hernandez is behind him with one hook, throws his hand over, starts coming up, threatening that seated arm triangle again. Allen sits through. Hernandez grabs that near ankle and chases him back up. The whole fight is just full of brilliant little sequences like this. The alternative to sitting all the way through is to just sort of corpse to go belly down, which Allen does here. As he switches, goes belly down. And all that happens is that Hernandez just comes back up to the back. And that is what's so great about this seated arm triangle. You can keep trying it, and then just, well, he throws himself onto a single hook there, but you can just keep trying it and coming up again, and that's the value. That's completely the opposite of the guillotine as most people attempt it in MMA. And to continue that sort of musing on a single hook and how that changes as the opponent circles around, here Hernandez gets the single hook, the crossbody ride, whatever you want to call it. He's got this wrist. If Alan goes to this shoulder, he's going to be in that awful 3/4 mount, or a sort of shit half guard with wrist control, the Dagestani handcuff. But once he gets that wrist that's under him free, he can turn all the way through, and best case scenario, we're back in a flat half guard, which lots of wrestlers like anyway, because them having their leg between your legs and hooked stops you from getting up as easily. But before we wrap up for the day, I want to give Brendan Allen some props for the cool leg attacks he was hitting in this fight. Anytime the guy in half guard here with the knee shield, anytime this guy's arm comes to this side of the bottom guy's head, he can start pulling him in. Gordon Ryan does this a ton. If you watched his fight with his match with Andre Galvao, it was just like 10 minutes of him trying to do this and just grinding on Galvao. But if that arm goes over the head, you can start flattening the mat into half guard. You can also throw that arm over the head and start separating this arm away, the opponent's arm, away for a Kimura. So all good things for the top guy. But as you do it, you sit this hip through, and Craig Jones is really good at this. I think he did this to Roberto Jimenez. But if you can time it, you can spin around this leg as he throws his arm over the top. Beautiful. Threw a little bit of a reap as Pantoja does. Gets on the leg. And has a moment of offense in a fight where he's largely dominated. Again, Allen's getting his ass kicked the whole match. As soon as Hernandez starts coming on top for mount, he gets this knee in and he throws this leg over for the reap. Boom. And the thing we love about the reap, Pantoja does it all the time. Brandon Royval did it to Tyra, however many nights ago that was. Leg locks in MMA, probably not working, probably not getting the submission. But if you can force that guy's knee to face that way, he can't then come back in and hit you. He has to go with his knee and turn away from you and give you a bit of space and then fall over on the slippery mat. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll be doing a podcast on the Patreon later this week. I'll be doing a tactical guide on the Patreon. Big article about Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. Subscribe to the channel for podcasts and occasional film rooms. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.